So this is joint work with Cecilia Mercado, who's in Rio, and Michela Sviacci, who is a grad student at Columbia University. And this is where Pierre-André lives. Right there. So this is from May, but every day almost there's something in the newspaper, at least if you live in New York, the local newspaper, talking about the rising housing prices in the city. And this particular article mentioned that in the first quarter of 2015, no homes in Westchester actually sold for 10 million or more. Okay? But there were 36 homes that sold for that or more in the city. So you can say, okay, well, Westchester, what's there? You know, why would you, you know, maybe they only have double trailers. Well, turns out there's some pretty nice property in Westchester. This, for instance, is available for 18 million. I'm sure they're willing to negotiate if you. And one of the end bathrooms look like this. Well, then take a look at the city. What do you get for a similar price? So this, I did a little search yesterday. This is from Zillow. So you can get a nice home. It's a little bit squished. But of course, what's the big difference? Well, if you live out there, you're going to have a hell of a commute. It's not insurmountable. It's been a commuting suburb. It still is. You would have maybe an hour, depending on traffic. Okay, so it has been done. Whereas here, of course, you would be able to walk or take the subway. So moving away from these anecdotes, I guess, this is a little bit more systematic information about housing prices. So this is using census data. And I'll talk more about how this data, how these numbers are generated. But what I would like you to pay attention to is that on the x-axis, and this is for the 27 largest cities in the US, on the x-axis we have the number of miles from the central business district. And on the y-axis is, in constant dollar terms, the reported value of a 2 to 3 bedroom single family home. And in 1980, what you see is that there is a slight premium for being in the city, very close to the CBD. So that you have a negative gradient here, but then it becomes flat and pretty soon becomes positive. Okay? So this is a nice commuting area. Okay? Now, so this is census data, so every 10 years. So in 1990, that has changed already. It pivots a little bit more in 2000. And then by 2010, we see that we essentially have a negative relationship. It flattens out here, but the strong positive relationship is not so evident anymore. And we see that what really sticks out is this high premium for being central. So this is colloquially referred to as gentrification. Yes?
I just wondering how crime rates have changed in downtown Manhattan.
They're up. I was so happy to see that. No, I'll get to that a little bit. But the hypothesis that we're proposing is that this development is linked to a labor market development where people who have high wages, and therefore wages, as you know, are pretty high. There's been increasing returns to skills. So increasingly, so what has happened is that high-income households also tend to be high wage households and high hours households. Okay? So this is a recent Wall Street Journal article. And so very simply put, we're hypothesizing that if you're not going to have a lot of leisure, you want to live close to work. Okay? If work is in the central business district, you want to live close to the central business district. Then, of course, another piece of the story is that skilled work is in the central business district. Okay, so I'm going to look at these components. So this is, yeah. So this is again using, no, this is using the public use census, the IPUMs, just showing. Okay, the colors are washed out. The figures are actually posted on. There's a link to the figures in the program. This is showing the percent of adults 30 to 50 who belong to work full time and have a certain education level. So this series is women. These series are men. And full time here is defined as 40 hours or more. And then the darker the series means the higher the education. So the light series here is high school, then college, then graduate degree. Okay, so college is only college. You don't have a graduate degree. And actually, there is a surprisingly large fraction of people with a college degree also have a graduate degree. Okay, so that's a non-trivial fraction. So if you look at men, we don't see a whole lot going on other than that men with high school or less are less likely to work full time. If we look at women, we see this well-known pattern that women's labor force participation, and this is measured at full-time 40 hours, it's been going up and then plateauing a little bit. And this shows it for education level. So you also see what you probably knew, that the higher educated work more. Okay? Now, if we cut this by 50 hours or more, here we see changes, more dramatic changes. And we see changes, we see that men, those with graduate degrees are separated from those with college degrees. So these two lines more or less overlapped, but now we see a clear separation. And of course, as you know, higher education is strongly linked to higher wages. And for women, we see the same kind of separation. And what I find quite interesting is that, so I should mention that for 2010, we're using the American Community Survey, and we're using a 5-year sample. So it's the average of 5-year samples centered around 2010. We see a bit of a decline, but it is the lowest for women with graduate degrees. And you see that here we have, this is conditional on education. Right? So among women with graduate degrees, 15% work 50 hours or more in this age group. So we think this pattern here can be linked to the rise in housing prices. Now, the rise in hours, because this is a new pattern. It used to be if you were wealthy or you were educated, you could take it easy. That's why we call it the working rich, although they're not super rich, but the working affluent, maybe it should be called. So obviously or naturally linked to, we think, to the returns to skills that be going up. And this, thinking about it in those terms, is not only intuitive, but it also helps us a little bit to get an empirical purchase on the problem, to link the rise of the working affluent, I should call them, and housing prices, because it suggests that we may think of create what's called a Bartik instrument that's been quite popular. So you take the industry structure, the employment structure in a city in 1970, and you use that as the base, and then given that employment structure for skilled workers in 1970, you then predict what the employment pattern will be going out. Okay, so that is the Bartik instrument. So that can give us a demand shifter that varies by year and city. Okay. Now, so this is sort of the story here. Returns to skill, we take that as gospel. leads to high wages, long hours. Then you want to live close to work. That leads to gentrification. Okay? I guess gospel means good news, so I shouldn't say that. We take that as the premise. So now, what does it look like? Does it, this just says that we have more people working long hours. Doesn't say that those people live close to the CBD. Okay, so let's take a look at that. So now, of course, this is women, and I start by showing women because women. Turns out that women are like me. I told my husband I will never commute. That was just so you know, I'm never going to move to the suburbs. Okay. Turns out women don't want to live in the suburbs if they work. Okay. Now, apologies for these figures here. The top two series show the fraction women who work 40 hours or more. The darker of these two is that they have a graduate degree. This is that they have a bachelor's degree. Again, if you have a bachelor's, you don't have a graduate. Okay, so these are two, they don't include each other. So in 1980, you see that there is this really already in 1980 looks like, the house price pattern. Okay? And then basically, what I want you to take from this is that as we get more women who are in this full-time skilled category, these lines shift up. But women stay quite committed to living close to the city center. And here, this is women who have a graduate degree who work 40 hours. This is women who have a graduate degree and work 50 hours. Okay? So the deviation from this is women who have a bachelor's degree and work 40 hours or more. Okay? So they seem to be more willing to move out to the suburbs. Now for men seem more willing to work and commute. So what you see here is that this looks more like 1980, right? The dip, and then it goes up. Okay? And that pattern remains, but you see here, this is men with the graduate degrees who work 40 hours or more. Here you see that they also start to look like women. And one possibility, of course, this is a family economics, is that they're married to some woman who won't live in the suburbs. It could also be other stories. But and these men, they part of the reason you can live in the suburbs here is that you have actually a wife who doesn't work. Okay. Let's see.
So could you do that separated for a man who's married to a woman who doesn't work and men?
Yeah. So I started this project thinking that, it is all about dual earner households. Okay? Because dual earners, they have two incomes, and increasingly we see positive assortative matching. So we see people have high education, both spouses. Now the woman wants to work. She wants to work in a job that is a good skill match. And this is a household that has a high purchasing power. Well, they have a high purchasing power, so to speak, until they have kids. So that sort of puts a brake on that. And I tried very hard to make this a story about the rise of dual earner households, but there are two things going on. We do have dual earner households rising, but actually not as a percent in the population, because we have another strong trend, and that is the rise of singles, even among the high income. And part of that is it's not that they're going to be single forever, but instead of marrying at 25, you marry at 35, so that adds 10 years where you can enjoy your high income and live in the city in a small apartment. Now, you could say, well, would that not be the case for everybody, this interest in living But of course, what's interesting, the housing market, perhaps more pronounced, in more pronounced terms, is very dominated by high-income households, and we also because we have a fairly inelastic supply. So the households with the most money will be able to decide location. So even if these are people with no more than high school, they may want to live close to the center, but they cannot compete. Right?
So why the explanation you gave, if young people are postponing marriage,
Yeah.
you would think that they would disproportionately want to live in the city.
That's what I'm saying. So that is.
So what would that drive up housing prices? They would drive up rental prices, so presumably they would drive.
Well, rental and housing prices are linked. So.
Right. So but that's a different explanation about wealthy. They're temporarily wealthy. That's before they have a family.
So we can say that we have a growing fraction of the population who are of that sort, that they have high income and low housing needs. I'm not saying but that is the demographics that is killing the story about dual households.
Right, but I was thinking, you see, it seems like a different kind of a story. So these young people, they have temporarily high income, they don't have kids, they get married, then they have kids, they move to the suburbs.
Not all of them.
But it's a different, I mean, that's an old story, that's what I'm saying. It's a composition shift, very different from increasing women labor force participation. It seems like that's a standard story, which is you live in the city until you get married and have kids.
Yes.
Then you move up.
Yes.
But
So
now you're delaying marriage and delaying the time that you have kids.
yes, and part of that is that actually many households try to stay in the city, and it's because I think women keep working. So I mean, I think it's a very similar story. So I'm not saying I'm saying anything new, but I'm saying that this group has increased, and that is why we because when you move to the city, when you move to the suburbs, it's hard to maintain to people doing long hours. So it's linked to your labor supply decision. And for some people, the margin that moves is labor supply. For some people, the margin that moves is that we're going to stay and just live in a closet, okay? Or delay having children or having fewer children. Yes. Right. So I'm going to talk about that briefly towards the end. Now, I just wanted to show this slide that shows the location of jobs. And because there's been what has been coined the suburbanization of jobs. And that is, so this is showing, actually it's just a count of the number of jobs using weights in the census. This is for 1980. There's something with 1980 is too small. So I need to ask the census about that. So maybe not pay so much attention to the level, but at least to the profile. What you see here is for people with no more than high school, there is this growth of jobs around 10 miles out. Okay? Now, when we look at people with a bachelor's or a graduate degree, it's not quite as pronounced. There is, and what you can also see here is that there is this strong concentration of jobs in the CBD. Okay? Yes?
So this is at the level of metro area, right?
This is at the it's at the level of a tract that is characterized by its distance to the CBD. Is that your question? No.
No, I was asking how do you deal with metro areas where there are dual CBDs like Minneapolis?
Yes, so I'll get to that. Okay. Yes, that's a good question. Yeah.
But this is, when you say these are where the jobs are, or where the
Yes.
people live?
No, this is where the jobs are.
Okay.
So I'm going to show you another one showing where jobs are relative to where you live.
Okay.
Yeah. But this is, yeah, sorry?
And the hours that you were talking about?
No, so this is unconditional on hours. So this is just taking the adults in 20 to 50, and because there is the question of place of work. And then essentially just counting them up by the distance to the CBD and the education level of the person who holds the job.
And you know the time that they spend commuting?
Yes,
Is that counted as working hours? Or?
it's not. I don't think so. From the wording of the question, I don't think so. Sorry. Okay. So, so I think I talked a little bit about this, but as I said, I started thinking about this as being about women's increasing labor supply and the sorting and essentially like the decline of the housewife. The housewife, she needs a husband, but she also needs a house, you know? It's boring to be a housewife without a house, right? Now, but if you're going to spend most of your day working and then slap on an hour of train commute, you're not going to enjoy your big house, okay? So that's sort of just a sort of idea here. Now, so the simple model, and as Aloysius pointed out, there's really nothing new here. But so this should all be familiar, but I'm just in a very pedestrian way going through it. So let's say we have a simple model of a city and sort of agricultural undeveloped land in the periphery. Women stay at home. They don't need to cook, but they stay at home. So this was the icon that they're housewives. Then the car arrives, right? And then you can live out in the suburb, get a big house. The husband commutes. And this is what's been called suburbanization or urban flight or white flight. It's a process that is concentrated in the 1940 to 1980 period. Then women start to work. They turn their back on the suburbs. And we get what we call gentrification, urban renewal. And this is a process that roughly can be dated to starting around the early 80s. Okay, so the early 80s, I actually Wikipedia this because I couldn't give it a decade, but yuppies is a term that appears in the early 80s. Okay, so decline of the housewife sort of was the part of the narrative there. Well, so there are two reasons wives work more. That's the dual earners, and then you don't have a wife. Okay, well that's another important demographic, and it just turns out that this is more important. Now, if we have single men, we also tend to have single women, and we talked about positive sorting, etc. But at the end of the day, we felt that we might as well just talk about individual labor supply. It's a little bit easier.
There's nothing in the story about the cost of time. So
Yes,
skill premium means that commuting time is
yes,
more expensive.
Exactly, and that's reflected in this growth in people, skilled people who work 50 hours or more. The unskilled, there's been a decline. So that is a long-standing story, and I think this is where sort of Jane Jacobs have her main point is talking about externalities in high human capital activity. So I mean, of course, any corporation would love to have their headquarters somewhere where rents are not as high as they are in Midtown Manhattan, and there, Citigroup tried to move out, etc. There's been many corporations move their back offices, etc. That's the suburbanization of jobs. But there is this interest in maintaining some key core activities in very high rent areas. So I just read yesterday that Crate and Barrel, for those of you who know what that is, it's a sort of mid-range household wear and furniture store. They're moving out of Midtown Manhattan because rents there are in the range of $1,500 to $3,000 per square foot. That means that this room would be $6 million to rent for a year. Okay, so this, as I said, this is well-thread territory. It links to many areas. So there's a long tradition of sort of in urban and real estate economics. at the metro level, I mentioned Jane Jacobs, who is, I think, one of the early, I shouldn't say advocates, but sort of points to that the congestion is actually countered by something valuable in the city. Glaser, of course, has worked on this. There's a recent paper by Baudry-Lewis talking about sort of linking it to endogenous growth and how, and I think that's sort of our theoretical justification for saying that the industry structure for employment of skilled labor in 1970 is actually quite important because that is the dawn, do you say that, the beginning of the internet information technology revolution. So the cities that were strong in those areas, they had stronger growth. And so they would say that we are now not in an equilibrium phase. We're in this phase where we're sort of reaching some other equilibrium in transitional phase. Now there's a fairly recent papers here by Rebecca Diamond and Enrico Moretti looking at why do skilled workers essentially, and what are the consequences of skilled workers? They have high wages, but they also tend to live in high rent areas. Why is that? There's the couple location choice, which sort of this paper used to be more related to, it's less now. But Jacob Mincer pointed out that typically, and this is Compton Pollack would agree with that, it's the husband's career that's most important. He determines where the couple lives. We're not disagreeing with that, but we're saying that, yeah, sure. But the wife gets to decide where in the city they live. Okay, so when the wife is a housewife, she wants a house. You live in the suburb. When the wife works, she doesn't want to commute. Okay, so city characteristics. The gentrification, as I said, has been going on. It's visible for the last 35 years. Kyoko Myers-Sinai, they have characterized the cities that have had strong real estate price growth. Saiz has characterized cities by the supply constraint. So obviously, if you have a very inelastic supply, any demand shift is going to have stronger effect on prices. And of course, the city center, by nature of being the center, land is very scarce, so it's very hard. You can go vertical up. You can go vertical down, it turns out. The real estate section in the Wall Street Journal talked about how there's now extreme basements. It's a new trend. The sub-metro level, of course, the local amenities matter. Are you close to a lake, a place with a nice sunset? Are you high up, etc., things like that? And of course, commuting, how central is it to where you want to be? And Michelle White is one of the early papers saying that women are different. They don't want to commute, okay? And there is time use work looking at how people spend their time. And what I find really interesting, the work by Gurian Hurst-Kearney point out that women who work actually spend a lot of time with their kids. So there's the, if you think about back in the 60s, women didn't work, but they actually didn't spend that much time with kids. Now women work, and the non-market time has become very child-centered. And I think we see that in popular culture as well. Okay?
So about that, maybe men are a little bit more. So the value of this time at home is changing a lot over time. So
Yes.
these men of the suburban men, they didn't care about the kids. They didn't want to spend any time with them. Now men, some want to.
Yes, and I think also because there's less leisure time, so you could sort of hang out with your buddies, go golfing for half the day or the whole day, things like that. But I agree, there was also more segregation of the sexes in the 60s, and you could have families where the father essentially didn't see the kids.
It was actually a benefit to be out of the house.
So that goes to my story that the guy gets to decide the city and the woman gets to decide the house. So there's sort of, once leisure becomes very scarce, you're going to try to combine lots of activities in that time window. So if you can see your kids, see your spouse, and see your friends at the same time, then that's good. I have friends who go on vacation with other friends.
Child quality is going to go down.
Sorry, what?
I mean, it seems like there's a model that says child quality, other things equal, is going to fall. Because what's the attraction of the suburbs to begin with? Is that the only reason why you move to the suburbs was somehow you think the kids are better off, they got better schools, it's safer. And now all of a sudden you say, well, I work now as a wife, I want to go out there. So then you're saying, okay, whatever the value of the old suburbs is, I don't care anymore, I rather prefer.
No, but media is change in the city endogenously.
Yeah.
The
So,
amenities in the city change endogenously.
and I think,
In
Lower
response to
crime,
you
there
coming
is
back, in response to you coming back, but there has to be, you wouldn't have gone up to begin with, right? So the fact that you come back and then you demand resources, this has to be that child quality.
people have fewer kids too. So, I mean, I think it does, I think it's a fairly easy conclusion to draw that women's, the expansion of labor supply has, it's eaten into a lot of stuff, including child quality, as if it's defined by, how, the things we think about. But as Kostas mentioned, there's actually very quickly, surprisingly quickly, changing endogenous, I call them amenities. So for instance, public schools on the Upper West Side, where I almost live in Harlem, as somebody said, but not quite. I was very surprised by that. Public schools, they supply one teacher, okay? Then the parents pay for an extra teacher. This is allowed in the school. So basically the parents chip in $4,000 each, okay? Pay for an extra teacher, and now you have better education, right? So basically you get good public schooling for $4,000, okay? So, and of course there is the private school option. But this is an example of how quickly things like this can change if you want to. Yes?
I think it's supporting the evidence to you is in the same sort of way they live others' time with the kids is increasing. So,
Yes.
so it's kind of in terms of child quality, yes, one is increasing time, thinking about the production function, other is kind of supporting the production function, is spending more quality time with the kids.
I understand all these arguments, I understand.
But can we not talk about child quality, because I see there is a link, but that seems like a different paper, okay? I mean, then we would need to discuss what goes into child quality, etc.
Because you can't explain the demand for suburbs. That's what's puzzling in this model. There's no demand. Somehow they just move out. I mean, because why did they move out to begin with?
Well, the wife has some utility too,
That's right. So why does the wife care about being in the suburbs? Why
because she can have a nice house. And I don't know if you ever talk to a woman, but women like to think of having a nice house.
I think that's a problem. You could also say, there's nice restaurants in the city, there was great theater.
No, but I think it's very clear. I think it's very clear. In the suburbs, you get space. And anyone who lives in the city, they live it every day that they don't have space. But they have the benefit of being close to work. And now that you have two people working, or you have 100% of the adults in the household working, that actually means a lot, rather than having a huge bedroom with an ensuite bathroom. And actually, I was going to say that the one thing about American houses is that they have actually grown quite a bit. So it could be a little bit about that too. It's the parent generation, they didn't expect their college kids to come home. Maybe they had an in-law unit for the parents, but here is the
That's also tax deductibility.
yes, but but anyway, yes.
Overall, it's a really difficult problem about how.
Right. So let me just, because I only have 15 minutes, so let me.
I suggest you look at Yves Zinou's book on this.
Yves Zinou. Sure. So, okay. So I think I already alluded to what we would do empirically. So this is not a theoretical paper. We're just using some well-known concepts out there. What we're interested in is linking the price in a tract, I'll talk about what that is, in a city in a year, to the fraction of the adult population who is skilled and work full-time. And then we have these distance dummies, a city dummy, a time dummy, and an error term. Okay? So now, before you say you can't run that regression, okay, I'm going to say, yeah, I know I can't run that regression. So that's why we're going to try to instrument this. Okay? Because I don't have time to talk about all the reasons this would be wrong, but I think you have already thought of them, many of them. Okay. So we're going to use this Bartik instrument, which is the employment composition in 1970. Then take that as a base, and then you do the weighted average using the national growth in employment of skilled workers in that industry. Okay, so the excluding the city in question. So let's say we take the proportion of college workers in telecommunications among all workers in New York City in 1970. Then you multiply that by the national growth in telecommunication employment for skilled workers, excluding New York City. You do that for all the industries and get a weighted average. Okay, so this will give you a demand shifter that we hope or argue for being plausibly exogenous. And we get that thing that varies now at the year and the city level, but it doesn't vary at the tract level. So, but to show you how the cities stack up, I just wanted to mention that we have in particular, we have the problem with two cities. Dallas-Fort Worth doesn't even have a segregated code. Okay, so the results I'm showing is going to be for including Dallas-Fort Worth, but I think I'm going to I've dropped them and things remain. But it is a problem for some of our places. Minneapolis is not a problem because Minneapolis is not in our samples. The way we picked our sample was just to take the top 20 cities in 2010 and the top 20 cities by population in 1970, and then the union of those. Okay, Minneapolis is just outside that. We have DC would be similar, close to Baltimore. But actually, I feel like they're very different. But anyway, but it's clear whether you're in DC, you belong to DC, or you belong to Baltimore. What you can see here is that there's fairly stable. Maybe you can see this is ranked according to the Bartik. In 2010, you see DC is doing very well. This is the growth of, I'm not sure, but they have a very educated workforce. And I don't know what accounts for their strong growth, but they do. We see here San Jose, San Francisco, Austin, Boston, Houston. New York is sort of, I thought New York would do better. I guess they're, anyway. But then at the bottom, we have places like San Antonio, Detroit, Memphis, Indianapolis, Jacksonville, Charlotte, etc. Okay, so we have this Bartik instrument. And then so we're going to instrument the fraction of adults here who are full-time and skilled using this Bartik instrument, and then letting there be a differential effect depending on how close you are to the CBD. That's how we generate variation at the tract level. And okay, so I think.
So we're addressing full-time work on how far away you live from the center of the city.
Yes.
I probably already discussed that, but isn't that endogenous itself?
It is the Bartik instrument, and then the Bartik instrument is allowed to have a bigger effect if it is depending on how far away it is from the CBD.
Yes, but full-time is going to be a function of distance.
Yes.
When we put it up there. side we've got the price of
the house,
of the individual house.
an individual house.
Well, so basically we have to assume that your taste for housing is kind of independent of the distance from which you live. No?
Distance,
From
sorry,
the center.
it is, no, actually, it is, I think it is saying that, we're saying that the idea behind this is that if you have a city with a strong demand for skilled workers, you're going to get more skilled workers. And here we allow there to be a distant differential. So we're allowing, but across cities, that there is a stronger effect, say, when you're close to the CBD. So I think that.
That's where I choose to live, right?
Yes.
So
Well, yes. So obviously this is going to be an outcome, a location outcome.
Also worried about both, the same thing. But let's look at the top regression there. There's a price at the left-hand side, which is there's a distance. Then there is a kind of this shock there, which reflects your preferences for the type of house, and that has to be independent of the distance you've chosen to live from the center. So the same way that FT is potentially endogenous, distance is as well. These are all simultaneously determined. What house I buy, whether I work full time or not, and whether I live in Westchester or in the Upper West Side.
Yeah. So this is very reduced form, and I wonder, in the interest, can I ask you after?
Yeah,
because this is, I mean, I think the main thing here is that we're saying that think if you buy Bartik as being exogenous, increase. Okay, and then here, I mean, we don't put any structure on this, but we allow the location of people to be, the distribution of the extra people that are attracted to vary by the distance. And our hypothesis is that these people are going to want to be close to the CBD. And I'll show you that, I think I show you that that is the case. Okay. So I think I talked about the data. We pick the area to be within 35 miles of the CBD. And we focus on adults 30 to 50. This is just showing what the tract is. And then the Bartik is using IPM's data. These are descriptives. Just want to mention a little bit about the price here, how that is generated. It is from the census. They ask owners, if your house sold today, how much would it sell for? So it obviously has some problems. What we did was that we restricted it to people who had moved in the last 10 years, thinking that those people would actually keep a closer eye on lives. We do this, we deflate this. There's an issue there, of course, because the CPI is 42% housing. So maybe you don't want to use the CPI. But it turns out that food actually moves in the same way. So we do use the CPI, but obviously now, a way to get a sense of, okay, what is it, do the numbers that are reported, how do they compare or stack up against things we actually know happen? So this is census data, but census seem to have data on actual transactions. And this is, again, from a Wall Street Journal paper. This is deflated values. So this really, I think, this is the deflated value of single-family homes. It's been creeping up, but not quite as much as when you don't deflate the value, right? Then, if you actually take into account how big they are, it's actually been steady. So what has happened over this period is that houses have gotten bigger, and I guess this should discourage you from investing in a house. But just to give you an idea that our prices, they move like this. Okay, so it's sort of, because we have 2 to 3 bedroom units, so So we try to control, but my guess is that the houses did get bigger. You know, it's at least plausible. And it is sort of between these two lines. Okay. Okay, this is the central business district. This we picked to the best of our ability. So DC, for instance, is the White House. San Jose, if you look at the map, it's not in Silicon Valley. There is actually a central business district. I didn't pick that. I thought, when people talk about San Jose, they don't talk about downtown San Jose. They talk about Silicon Valley. Otherwise, it's pretty much what you would expect. Often, actually, in the places I haven't been to, they actually say downtown, downtown Holiday Inn. Okay, then you know roughly that's it. There are a number of stuff that we didn't want to have in there, but you sort of then you're curious, but it's also so endogenous. But these are, say, income, race, foreign-born, married. Maybe I'll have time to show you what it looks like. But as you might imagine, except for married and foreign-born, but race and income move in the expected direction with more skilled full-time workers. The distance here, we dummy it out because, as you've seen, it's a very nonlinear relationship. It turns out that we could actually just have a dummy for the 0 to 3. And we might move to that specification. We used the 20 to 35 as the reference group. Let's see. Okay. So in the reduced form, this is the specification Cecilia likes, which I find a little bit reduced form. But essentially, this is the price regressed on the Bartik instrument. And the Bartik interacted with these distance dummies. And the outer ring is the reference area. So in this specification, we have year and city dummies. In this specification, we have a metro year dummy. So the Bartik drops because it varies at that level. But what you see here, if we look at this, is that a higher demand shock for skilled labor does increase housing prices. So housing prices are in thousands. So, and say Bartik varies in a year. The max min distance is 0.3. So this would say like $115,000 difference in the lowest to highest Bartik place. And then if you are close to the CBD, you get an extra boost. Okay? The second set of columns is just using 1980s. That turns out it's not that important, but if you think of 1970, it hadn't really started. But I think I like 1970. I think a lot of things really sort of points to 1970 being an important scene. Here, we just split the sample by using the size index for whether the housing is elastically or inelastically supplied. And we see that in the low elasticity places, we do get a larger effect in the way we would have expected. Now, in the sort of a first stage, we're looking at a full-time on the Bartik. Distance dummies, Bartik interacted with distance dummies. I see. And here we have, I corrected this in the previous word, but here we have the metro year fixed effect, so this one drops. But in this here you see a very strong effect of being close to the CBD. Okay? And here I'm showing for these other things that at some point we're thinking, should we try to control for? But then it's so endogenous. Can you really? Because anyone would say, what drives housing prices is income, right? So, but in the game is to understand why do people with high income want to live in a specific place. But of course, income, you get a very strong effect. White and income is, if I did non-Hispanic white, I would get an even stronger effect. Black, married is sort of a bit washed out, as I said. There's been a huge decline in marriage. Okay, this then is sort of where it all culminates. Price on full-time with good controls for distance. Okay. And if we I think, I guess I could say that, well, the OLEDs and IVs are very different, and if we believe the IVs, each cell here is from a different regression. And I personally favor using the graduate degree working 50 hours, because I feel like if you work a lot, right, you're going to value not commuting much more. Also, the graduates are the ones with the highest income. But you can't really from here separate out the categories. And I just want to show this last thing, which is this is the actual price. The red is the actual price increases we see over this period by distance. This is in categories. And this line shows the predicted back of the envelope calculation using full-time 50 graduate. Now, these other things here, the problem with them is that the full-time 50 over predicts here, price increases here, but these other measures do it even more. Okay, thank you. So I just want, my last slide here is that going forward, we have done, actually. We've done this as a panel, results hold, and the point estimates are very similar. Initial conditions percent black, we've done that because there's a huge segregation literature, has the expected effect, dampens the effect. Gendered batik we're going to do. Children public school, there was a question about that. We have that information in the data, so we're going to look at, my hunch is that the CBD remains pretty childless. But the other thing is that you don't need to send your kid to public school. You can also send it to public school, to a private school. That's pretty common in many places. Then crime is something that I would like to add, which I think would be an interesting thing to look at. Okay, thank you.
Any questions?
Lunch.